Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Crime and Entertainment. Now, I have here a very special guest, and I say that a lot because each one of my guests are special, but this one is a little different because he survived one of the worst tragedies ever that America had to endure. And by the picture you can see in his background, I am talking about 9/11 since this is our 9/11 episode that we are dropping. Please welcome to the show, Erik Ronningen. How you doing, my friend?
Wade, thank you so much. I'm doing well. Thank you.
Well, look, it's a pleasure to have you on, man. I'm very excited to get this interview here and find it because you've got an amazing story. You were actually in the North Tower, the 71st floor of the North Tower, when the plane hit. You didn't leave. You weren't like most that your first instinct was to completely get out of there. And we're going to get into that story. But before we get into September 11th, I want to start. Let's go with September 10th. Like, what was an average day for you at the office?
Well, September 10th was a Monday,
Mm-hmm.
and I was working on a project called the automatic fare collection system for the monorail that went to the Newark International Airport. And it was just another day doing all the paperwork and meeting with people and having meetings. And I met the head of the security department, Doug Karpeloff. He was director of security for those twin towers and the 5 other buildings.
Right.
And we said a brief hello because we were good friends. And it was just another day. Went home just like everyone at 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. and got up the next morning. And it was an absolutely gorgeous, beautiful, cloudless, crystal clear day, which is unusual for New York City to have it that crystal clear.
Mm-hmm.
But that's it was just another normal day, nothing special
Well,
on the
now
10th.
you actually there was something going on with your job, right? That you were actually about to get full employed by something along those lines. I didn't get the exact story of
Yeah,
that, but break that down for me.
yes. September 11th at 9 a.m. was going to be a great day for me. I'd been working as a consultant the previous 5 years. And at 9 a.m., the executive director, which is the equivalent of a president of a corporation, was going to sign the paperwork making me a Port Authority employee. It was the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, which runs more than just the biggest bus terminal on the planet,
Right.
but
That's a huge
also
deal.
the World Trade Center, the three major airports, the tunnels, the bridges, a subway system, and a few other sundry facilities. It's a huge organization. And
So that,
so
that was supposed to take place at 9 a.m.
9 a.m. So I missed becoming an employee by 14 minutes,
Mm-hmm. That's what I was just
which
looking here in my notes. The plane hit it at 8:46 when it slammed into the North Tower. Now,
yes.
was your floor always on the 71st?
The previous 5 years, I was had offices on the 35th floor in the South Tower. Um, I had offices up, I think, on 82 in the South Tower. Then they got changed to the 71st floor in the North Tower
Wow.
about a year previously.
All right. So when that first plane hit, like, what was your day that day? Like, you said everything was normal. I think I'd heard that you normally like to go in and, grab a cup of coffee and go to the top of the world, or what is it? What was that called?
Well, yeah,
Windows of the world.
yeah. Windows on the world. I did not do that morning because I knew I had a 9 a.m. meeting
Oh, I have.
with the executive director. But I normally came in, stopped at the coffee station, picked up a 20-ounce cup of coffee, walked through the mall, said hello to the chief of police, who was always on his post watching everyone come and go, and patted the head of the bomb sniffing dog that officer David Lim had, and went through the revolving doors, up the escalator, up the elevators, and straight to my office. And I got to my office probably a little before 8 a.m. and was doing the normal stuff, getting ready for that 9 a.m. meeting. So but it was that day. It was just unusual in the clarity and freshness of the atmosphere in the sky.
So where were you at specifically when that first plane hit, and what in the world could you have thought happened? Take us through those events, because I know that had to be unlike anything anyone had ever experienced, and there's probably all sorts of things that run through your mind of what it could be. What was, your experience?
Well, my office was on the south side of the North Tower, so I had a magnificent view of New York Harbor, and I always enjoyed taking my first sip of coffee, facing out the windows, watching the tugboats ply up and down, and when the ships would come in, I'd watch the ships come in up the Hudson River. And if I looked east, I could see on a clear day, which that day it was, I could see aircraft landing and taking off at Kennedy Airport, JFK. So it was just a wonderful view. So I took a sip or two of coffee, then got down to preparing for my 9 a.m. meeting. And at 8:45, my boss had not yet arrived. And when he was not there at 8:45, he was usually in the elevators. So I took note of that. And then just out of the blue, suddenly, of course, there was this tremendous explosion somewhere high up in the tower. And that tower jerked and twisted south, twisted north, then twisted south, and then settled north. The explosion was just unbelievable. My first thought was I was going to be slingshot through the window and down the nearly 1,000 feet into the plaza. But I was not. I kicked my feet off the convector, the heating unit, and rolled out into an open area. And people that were walking were falling on the floor. Equipment that was on file cabinets, if it wasn't very secure, it would slide off and it was falling onto the floor. So I kicked my chair back, and because the roar was so loud, I instinctively knew that that tower was collapsing. So instinct takes over. I immediately, you know how we bend over to protect our head and our body.
Yeah.
I bent way over horizontal in the chair with my arms up over my head to protect myself. And I immediately said to myself, stand up and die like a man, which I did. I stood up, and the roar kept on roaring. And then I looked south through the windows again, and that magnificently beautiful day had disappeared. Paperwork, cardboard, trash, furniture was just being ejected out of the upper floors, and that view was now totally gone. I couldn't even see the South Tower, which was 200 feet away. And just as I was looking out of that tower, a fireball came whooshing, sizzling, exploding right outside the windows. And I thought for the second time in that 5-second period that explosion was going to go right through the window and kill those of us that were standing there. But it did not. My first thought was that an airliner had somehow inexplicably driven into the top of that tower. That was my first thought.
So you originally did think that would have been an airliner?
I did. What else could it have been? It wasn't a
Right.
Piper Cub.
Right.
It wasn't a Piper Cub. It wasn't. Someone hadn't hauled 10,000 pounds of C4 up there, because we catch all that.
Yeah.
In spite of all the other theories that have been bantering around the last 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
That was my first thought. Yes.
Wow. So at this point, like, what is your plan of action? Are you looking around, trying to see if people are okay, who you can help out? Is it to go ahead and, I would assume at that point, immediately want to start evacuating people, right? Or what's the plan here?
Well, what happened, Wade, was that immediately from all around the floor, and those were 1-acre floors,
Mm-hmm.
but they were big floors. Immediately, you could hear a dozen voices yelling, evacuate the tower, get out of the tower. because many of the employees were also there in the 93 bombing that took place.
Yeah.
So they knew. And since the 93 bombings, twice a year, there were fire drills and evacuation drills. So everyone was very well trained and disciplined about how to get out of those towers. So that floor emptied probably in 90 seconds,
Wow.
except for me.
Now, where did that plane hit on that floor? Was like the 80th or 90th? Where did it hit? Pretty high, right?
It was high on the North Tower. It was, I think it was 91 to 96 on the north side of the North Tower.
And nobody above the impact zone in the North Tower lived, correct? Because if I'm not mistaken, my book just fell. If I'm not mistaken, that severed all the stairwells, so there was really no way to get down below.
It did. Anyone above that impact zone did not get out.
Wow.
Yeah, there are 3 stairwells, and all 3 of those were absolutely severed. So there was no way out.
Wow.
And of course, Windows on the World was at the top of that tower.
So if you were in there, it was just, you were done. I mean, there wasn't nothing you could do.
No, and the executive director was going to come down in time to be in his office on 64 by 9 a.m. and he was up there having breakfast.
Oh, so he was up there.
So he never made it out.
Wow.
So
I know I seen on the TV where some of the, and I'm not sure which tower it was. It could have been the second one, but I think a group of people tried to go to the roof thinking that there was a possibility to maybe be rescued. Was that the North or the South Tower?
Well, probably both towers. Certainly the North Tower. And you could get to the roof, but there were so many antennas up there that the primary antenna interfered with any helicopters coming in.
Mm-hmm.
And the parapets, on the perimeter were full of all sorts of antennas also. So it was impossible for anyone. And of course, the updraft from the heat and didn't allow.
Yeah, it had to make it hard for any sort of helicopters or anything to get in there and be stable to try to do anything.
Yes.
So you said you weren't heading out right off the bat. What was your mode of thinking here?
Well, I was thinking that what I would do is that I knew it was going to be a long day. So I went into the core of the building where the men's and ladies' rooms and elevators are. And I did my business in the men's room with that. I just finished that 20-ounce cup of coffee. So I knew I'd better do something to take care of that little bit of business, because
I'll be honest with you, when that plane hit, I'd have probably took care of it where I was standing.
So I did that, and then it came back to my desk, and I collected my backups for the project that I've been working on the last year. Put them in I had a small briefcase, put them in the briefcase. And then not 15 feet away, I saw a young lady, her name was Whitney, just standing, looking out the east windows. And I went over to her, put my hands on her shoulder and quietly asked, "Whitney, are you okay?" And she said, "I'm just putting my laptop away so I can bring it with me." And I said, "I'll escort you down." Well, I learned a year later that what she had done, why she was somewhat frozen, she'd seen bodies coming down the windows not 10 feet from her. And that rather undid her.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Which is understandable.
Yeah, I remember the visuals watching this take place. And, I was fresh out of high school. I was, I think maybe 19 when this happened. Maybe 20, I can't remember. But, I remember seeing people make that choice to jump and thinking like, God, how horrible it would have been to know that was your choice, to either stay up there and burn to death or jump, because either way it's certain death. And you've seen people trying to just hang out the windows or, wedge themselves in a way to where they could just be outside and then slipping and falling. And I mean, it was just traumatic.
It was dramatic.
Yeah.
It was, it was just awful. Of course, it was 2000 degrees. And so people were melting.
Yeah.
And that initial impact, people were blown out of the windows. They weren't jumping at that point. They were jumping later.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And see, the
Because
reason that's so significant is because American Airlines Flight 11, which is the one that hit your tower, it departed
yeah,
Boston roughly around 7:59, and then a group of hijackers, I think that one was led by Muhammad Atta, so the reports say, took control of that plane. Then at 8:46, slammed into the North Tower, killing 11 crew members and 76 passengers. But the thing was, it was bound for Los Angeles. So it had as much gas as you could probably fit on those things, which led to these, fires,
yeah.
huge fireballs and massive explosions that you've seen. Um, yeah, that I know there was some stories of some people surviving the impact zone in the second tower. I don't. Did anybody like around that impact zone survive anything in the north?
I don't know the answer to that question, but there were people that were above the impact zone because there was one stairwell
Yeah,
that
and that one.
could be navigated.
Yeah, I remember
So
that in
people
the
did,
first one.
yes, some people did come down that. But in my book, I've got the story of Tad Hank, who was a Port Authority engineer on the 86th floor. He was just getting ready to go into the sixth sub basement, the lowest sub basement, and spend the day down there doing some work. So he stood up, he looked out of his north window. You could see a magnificent view of all of Manhattan. He looked around and there are helicopters flying and small planes flying up and down the rivers. And you could see Westchester County Airport. It was that clear. And just as he turned to leave his desk, something registered that wasn't right. So he turned back and squarely faced the north, looked out those windows, looked up and down, and lowered his eyes, and he saw a commercial airliner flying south over Fifth Avenue, just missing the Empire State Building, flying very, very fast, heading towards the North Tower, aiming at his office, coming directly to him. And that is some story that he has
I ain't kidding.
that he shared with me.
Wow, that is nuts.
And of course, at the last minute, he noticed that the plane accelerated and the wings tipped east, and he could see what he thought were the pilots, and the passengers all crammed into the portholes of the looking out the windows, and he saw the American Airlines logo on the side of the aircraft, and then the explosion.
Wow. Yeah, I can't imagine for those people either, because I think by then they obviously knew they had been hijacked.
Yes.
Yeah, they didn't realize, I don't think, the intent of the hijackers. One being Muhammad Atta, who hit your tower. The other one, I think, being Marwan Al-Shedi, that was piloting the other plane. That had to be a traumatic experience, like literally for everybody involved. Everybody on those planes, not knowing what their fate was going to be. Everybody in those planes, obviously doing, like you said, a normal day at work. You already knocked out your Monday. You're trying to get through Tuesday and get to hump day, and then here this is.
Yeah. Yeah.
When did you start making your way down the steps, and did you have any deterrence along the way? Were you trying to do floor sweeps? How did that happen?
Well, when I was trying to calm Whitney down and said I'd escort her down, she said, before we go, let's do a sweep of the floor. So I said, great idea. So we did the entire perimeter of the floor. There was a blind man with his seeing eye dog that worked on the floor, and he was gone. There was a gentleman that was in a wheelchair the whole time. He was gone. And we were the last two on the floor. So we entered one of the stairwells. I think it was the A stairwell. And my initial instinct, because of what obviously taken place up above, was to go up and see if I could provide some help. So once I got into the stairs, I tried to go up, but the flow of people coming down was, it was impossible for me to go up without a great deal of effort.
Yeah.
So I turned around and escorted Whitney down as far as I could. Now in the stairwells, it took about an hour to get down from the 71st floor. It was fairly uneventful. From time to time, maybe 3 times, we hit pockets of aviation gas smoke, and you cannot inhale. We couldn't inhale aviation gas smoke.
Right.
So we were holding our breath. I thought, oh my gosh, we'll never make it out of this tower. We'll all suffocate. But there were little pockets. And then people were pulling out handkerchiefs. They were ripping their shirts into pieces to make masks for themselves. And I've only mentioned this once before, but some of the women were taking their bras off.
Oh.
The men with pocket knives were cutting them down the center so that there were 2 face masks to get through all of this. And it was fairly hot in those stairs, but everybody was moving. It was really very quiet and very controlled going down those stairs. And once I got into about the teen floors, I could hear the walls cracking and pipes snapping, and water was pouring out of the sheetrock walls and flowing, cascading down the stairs. Well, that morning, I put on a brand spanking new pair of wingtip shoes to break in. So now they're getting soaked. And I reached down and rolled my trousers of my suits up above my knees because I didn't want them to get wet. It sounds rather ludicrous now looking back at it. And so I walked down the remaining 17 floors. And as we got out, there was security asking what floors we were from. And so I told them 71, and the security had done a wall shoulder to shoulder that we had to walk between. They were channeling us out of the tower and onto West Street to go north onto West Street. Well, I'd been in the security department for a couple of years previous, and I knew Doug Karpoloff was in charge of this whole thing. So I broke out of line, and I went to the north, the north windows on the plaza, and I was literally 3 inches. My nose was almost on the windows, and my toes, tips of my feet were on the windows. And I looked out, and the devastation and debris and dust and paper and just it was just unbelievable. It was nothing but black and white. And I looked down, and there were 3 bodies right there at the base of my feet, the other side of the window. They looked like pretzels. And as I looked out across the plaza, I could see other bodies lying around. But now it's over an hour has passed. My body is exhausted. I have no emotion in me. Then I leave and I walk over to the east side of the tower so I could look out over the plaza, the fountain. It was the same scene. Bodies, trash, black and white. Everything was coated. You couldn't even see the brand new terrazza of the plaza. And as I was looking out, a gentleman in a suit, horizontal, facing the windows, came down, and we, at 6 feet, eye to eye, we made eye contact. And just as quickly, he kept on going, and there was the explosion, which sounded like the discharge of a shotgun. Those bodies hitting that pavement sounded like shotguns discharging.
Jeez.
Well, his discharged, and fluids were all over the glass in front of me. And then I said to myself, I'm heading down to the security command center to help Doug Karpoloff. He needs all the help he can get. We had hours and hours and hours over the years since the 93 bombing, going through scenarios, how we would be hit next. Well, we didn't consider this one. Who would be stupid enough to commit suicide to drive an airplane into a building?
Wow. Now, were you in the stairwell coming down when the second tower got hit?
Yes.
What did you think was going on there? Did you think your building was coming down, or did you figure out what was happening?
I didn't know that the South Tower had been hit. some woman had a Walkman or a radio in her ear, and she said, another plane has hit the building, another plane has hit the building. And I said to myself, it's just the press whipping this thing up. Well, she was referring to the South Tower, but maybe didn't know it. It wasn't until I got out, which was still, I'm still in the building. And so now I walk down the long escalator into the main entry of the tower, where the main elevators are, where the security desks are for signing in. And by golly, Wade, the sight of that, there were big directional sign. It was all hanging on one wire and one chain. The elevator doors, not all of them, but many of them were all punched out and kiltered. And so I walked through there were about 12.5 revolving doors going into the mall. And the mall led to the South Tower. And all of those revolving doors were all like punched out. So I just walked through. And then because of the fountain that was in the plaza, the water was pouring through the ceiling like Niagara Falls. So I held my breath and walked through this waterfall of water. And then the mall was all dark except for some emergency lighting. So I headed south to wade to the South Tower because I knew a back stairwell that would get me down into the basements, into the sub-basements. And I got to Ben and Jerry's, which the stairs was behind Ben and Jerry's. And there were firemen, there were policemen, there were probably a dozen law enforcement and firemen. And they were yelling at me to get out of the towers, get out of the building. And I told them, I identified myself, showed them my ID, told them that I was heading down to the security command center to assist with the evacuation. And I finally talked them into it because I refused to do what they said. And so they said I had to wait for a few minutes because they were bringing equipment up from the stairs. So I did, but not very long. Suddenly I got so antsy, I just had to move. And what I did, I moved into the lobby of the South Tower. It was in the same condition as the North Tower. I couldn't believe my eyes. And there was not a person around. It looked like New York City had been evacuated for 20 years. Not a soul was evacuating. So I went down to the west side and took a look at all of the security desks. No one was there. I looked up the center, which was empty, and then I went up to the fire station, totally empty. And those should have been manned by emergency personnel. But as I was in that lobby, I could hear a low-throated groaning, grinding from somewhere deep within the bowels of the tower. And I was too exhausted to consider what that noise was. But now I leave the lobby, I wade through the mall, I go to the other side, walk up the escalators and get onto Church Street, which is just to the east of the towers.
Mm-hmm.
And all the security is saying, keep moving, don't look back, don't look back. Of course, that's an open invitation to stop and turn around and look back. Mm-hmm. So I stepped out of the line of evacuees and of course looked back. And that's when I discovered that the South Tower was in flames also. And I said, holy smokes. This is just more than we ever considered in any of our scenarios. But I could not get to the upper tower. I could not get to the basements, but I saw that I could have been of value in the plaza where I saw people or bodies laying. So I said, all right, I'm going into the plaza to provide whatever assistance I can. And just as I got to the intersection of Fulton Street, which ends right there at Church Street, and it's the Millennium Hotel on the corner.
Right.
I'm about to turn right to go west, to go into the plaza. And of course, on Church Street, there must have been 10,000 people that have been evacuated. They're all evacuating Lower Manhattan. There were thousands and thousands of people all gawking up at those towers. And what was interesting also, before I started to go into that plaza, I noticed on the Church Street, there were splotches of blood about every 2.5, 3 feet. And I just silently wondered what was that blood doing there? What's the cause of that? So just as I'm about to turn west to go into the plaza between the towers, a little voice in my head said, "Walk east." He was quiet, and there was no question not to obey that little voice. My right foot came down. I did a military left flank. I started marching east towards Fulton Street, and I got about a dozen paces, and I was dead center over Church Street, and the earthquake started. I thought Church Street was going to collapse, and we were going, those of us that were on Church Street, which were thousands of us, were going to collapse into the subway system below.
Holy cow. What,
I stopped.
that had to be a sight, man, for that thing to come down.
I stopped. I turned around so I could watch that South Tower, and I watched it collapse. And for an instant, I thought, my God, that tower is going to fall on us and kill us all. And in the same instant, I thought, whatever, it is what it is. And I had no fear, because where are you going to run to escape a 1/4 mile high building falling on you?
Yeah, you can't.
You can't. You can't.
And that thing
So-
come down quick, man. I mean, I know on TV it doesn't do it justice of how quick that to come down. Like you said, it come down with a
Yes.
quickness, and that's a lot of debris that's
A
gonna
lot of
be
debris.
dispersed.
Well, now those tens of thousands of people are in an instant panic. And one thing you never want to get caught in is a panicking crowd of people. So I matched my speed to their speed so that I could navigate to the edge of the crowd and tuck myself behind the column of the loading dock of the Millennium Hotel so that they could pass me by without injuring, and shrapnel would go by me without injury. But now I have the answer to the splotches of blood. In that panic, ladies' high-heeled shoes and men's loafers are flying through the air. People are running out of their shoes and stepping on the shrapnel, the glass and the metal, and cutting the soles of their feet and running. So I stayed behind that column until the crowd thinned. And now I step out to go back to the towers, and I'm confronted by that 800-foot high pyroclastic cloud of pulverized concrete, sheet rock, asbestos, whatever else was in there. And I looked up at that thing and said to myself, I don't think I can survive one more incident like this. I was totally exhausted, but we don't quit. I turned around. I refused to run because that can cause panic. And I didn't want to panic, but I can walk pretty fast. Tried the doors of some of the merchants that were up and down Fulton Street, but they were all locked. They'd all since been evacuated. And so I went as far as I could. And just before that cloud hit, I took a big, deep breath. And it was like a force 5 wind just punched me. And it was instant darkness. And all of the screaming and wailing and of all those people instantly stopped. It was pitch black and silent as a tomb. I couldn't figure out what happened to all those people.
Holding their breath.
And then that little voice in my head repeated itself. It said, walk east. Well, I was already walking east, so I continued. And I stopped at one point because my eyes were open. I couldn't see a thing. And I put my hand up to my nose. I could not see anything. I couldn't breathe. So I pulled my jacket up over, hoping I could breathe inside my jacket. Well, that didn't work. It was pitch black also. So I went as far as I could, and I tried to inhale, and I kept inhaling grit and all that concrete and dust and whatever. And I went as far as I could. And my knees started to collapse. They started to buckle. And I thought, well, here I am. I'm going to meet my maker somewhere in an unknown street in lower Manhattan. And as they were beginning to collapse, there was a little fuzziness that was out of the ordinary of that black cloud just to my right. So I just willed myself to stand up and take one step forward towards it. And it was a man opening the back door of a delicatessen. And I followed him in, and the staff of the deli were handing out liquids. I took a one sip and I could breathe. My eyes were frozen open, my ears were clogged, my nostrils were packed, my throat was constricted from all of that dust. It was impossible to breathe.
Jeez.
But one swallow and it opened my throat, so now I could breathe. And I made it. I made it through. And that was just the beginning of the day.
I don't know who that is talking to you, my friend, but they was giving you the right advice, because
Well, yes. Oh, yes.
Geez. Now, there was a guy, and you may know him or you may not know of him. I forgot his title, but I know he was really influential in trying to set up, you know, things as far as evacuations and stuff like that. Did you know? Did you know Rick Rescorla?
Oh yeah, Rick. Yes, Rick. I knew he was the security manager, director of was it Marsh McClellan?
Yeah.
McClellan, USA,
Mm-hmm.
up in the up in the, I think, the South Tower.
Yeah.
And he's credited for getting every one of his people out.
Yeah.
And then the tower came down on him. Yeah, he's from the United Kingdom, and there's a nice little memorial to him somewhere over there.
Yeah, they said that he kind of always, I think, knew they were going to come back after the failed bombing in '93. Well, it wasn't a failed bombing. I think people look at that as a failed bombing because it didn't do what, you know, later on did, but they killed a number of people too.
Yes, they did.
It's not like it was, you know, a flop. It did kill and take innocent lives, but obviously it didn't cause the tragedy that happened on 9/11. But Ramzi Youssef, the guy that kind of, I think he built those bombs, they said Rick always had a feeling, a deep gut feeling that it was not over, that they were going to come back, and this time they were going to come back in a heavier, much heavier way than before.
Yes. Yeah, he wasn't the only one that knew that was going to happen. There were a number of people, and the name escapes me now, but he was with the FBI, and he was considered a bit of a maverick. And mavericks are good people because we don't follow the rules.
Yeah.
And we can accomplish things. But he retired. He was going to be the new security director for the World Trade Center, because just 6 weeks prior, Silverstein Associates won a 99-year lease to run the towers.
Yeah.
For the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
But so Doug Karpoloff was training him and going around, but he didn't make it out either. None of those folks made it out.
Okay. When did Silverstein take over the lease for those buildings?
It was September 11th, August, probably at the beginning of August, the end of July, somewhere in there.
So very close to the attacks.
Yes.
There's often been stuff, like you said earlier, with the millions of conspiracy theories that's been thrown around. There's often been a lot of things that equate that because of the insurance policies and whatnot that were on the building. And I think, and I may be wrong, so don't quote me on this, but he was trying to get a payoff for each building, considering they both collapsed.
Oh, yes, yeah. There was all that politics, of course, which I didn't follow.
Yeah.
I was still trying to figure out my left hand from my right.
Oh no, I can't imagine. And not only, like, you're going through all this, everything that you just explained, and then not even knowing if a lot of your coworkers, friends, what's going on with them, because this is before, obviously you probably couldn't even use a cell phone at that time anyway. It was probably, everything was jammed, and I know this is a different time, but you don't have that availability to communicate with people right off the bat.
No,
What
no
after
pay.
you stuck it out through there? What was did you want to kind of contact your family? What was your steps after you was in that delicatessen and kind of
Well,
got your head cleared?
yes. Well, well, I was able to breathe again, and after a couple of minutes, I was aware of a woman screaming, and so I turned to find who was screaming, and it was a woman on the telephone. And I said, "My God, there's a payphone in here." If any young people are watching this, they may not know what a payphone
Yeah,
is,
probably don't even know what that is.
but but so I quietly went over to this woman. She was a big, lovely black woman, and just screaming, panicking. So I put my left arm around her, and I spoke very quietly and calmly to her to calm her down. And she finally calmed down. I had my hand, then I wrapped my hand around her hand that was on the receiver, because now other people realize there's a phone in there. We didn't have cell phones like we have today.
Yeah.
And I helped her hang it up. And I had one phone call to make. And I was first. And now everything's shaking. My body's just shaking from the exertion, from all those stairs. It's 144 flights, 71 floors, over 2,000 stairs. It was a long haul. So I reach into my jacket pocket and I pull out a phone number for friends that I know they're up in Midtown. I very carefully dial, because I know I only have one chance, because the line is behind me, impatiently waiting.
Yeah.
The woman Lee picks up the phone. I said, "Lee, it's Eric. I made it out. Would you kindly call my wife and my mother, let them know I'm out of the tower?" And she asked, "Do I know what the status of Doug Karpoloff was?" And I said, "No, I don't," and hung up. Now that was before the South Tower collapsed.
Right.
So now the lower Manhattan, the primary dust, it was more than dust. It was just all that cloud. Much of it had cleared sufficiently so we could breathe.
Right.
So I stepped out of that delicatessen, and my foot comes down to go west back to the towers. I'm determined to provide some help. And that little voice said two words: "Walk east." I could not disobey that little voice. It was automatic. So I
Especially
walked
not
east.
now. Especially not now.
I walked east, and then I worked my way through under the Brooklyn Bridge and the Manhattan Bridge, and working my way north. And I ended up on the Bowery. And New York is known, the Bowery is known for the Bowery bums, for many New Yorkers and people that read novels. And I've gotten so far up on the Bowery, finally, my thirst is impossible. Everyone's handing out water for free, but no one's on the Bowery handing out any water. I go into another deli, and their water is in the back. So I go into the back. I take one bottle of water, I bring it all the way to the front, and I put it on the counter for the cashier. He looks me up and down and he says, "That'll be $1." Well, I was hoping he was going to give it to me,
He charged
but he charged me. But in looking back on it, the Bowery is full of Bowery bums. I had a blue pinstripe suit on. My trousers were rolled up above my knees. My hair, I had more hair then than is showing today, I looked like the Pillsbury Doughboy.
Wow.
That was the color of my suit and my skin and everything. And so I can understand. He thought I was another bum. So my right hand was literally thrashing around my trouser pocket to pull out $1. It was an effort to pull that buck out, but I did it. Thanked him, went out, sat down on the sidewalk and leaned against the wall. People are passing me by the thousands. thousands of people are walking out of lower Manhattan going north and walking over the Brooklyn Bridge, getting up as far as the George Washington Bridge. The Holland Tunnel and the Lincoln Tunnel are closed, so they're not allowing any pedestrians through there. It's only for emergency responders. I finish the water. I struggle to get up, and every muscle is Charlie horsed. And I stagger north, and I keep on walking. I just keep on walking. I finally meet my destination, ring the doorbell, and Lee comes and opens the door. She looks at me from the top of my head, slowly down my body to my feet, back up again, and bursts out laughing. Well, the sight was so incongruous, and her laughter was contagious. And I started to laugh, and it broke the tension. So she invited me in. I plopped myself down in front of their television, looking like the Pillsbury Doughboy. She said nothing about her furniture. She was awfully good. And her husband was there. And of course, the TV was showing nothing but what was going on. Wade, I could not believe what was taking place and what had taken place. I could not pull my eyes off that television. I could not believe we made it out of those towers. It was just, I ran into a couple of colleagues and they both asked me at different intervals, did anyone else make it out? We thought we were the only ones that made it out of the towers from our floor. But we did, lots of people made it out. But by golly, I couldn't take my eyes off that. After an hour, I asked them if I could use their shower.
At what point did the second tower fall? Did you see the second one fall?
I did not see the second one fall. I'm walking north, and someone stopped me. A lot of people stopped me because I was an anomaly,
right?
And it was obvious where I'd been, because they evacuated all of Lower Manhattan up to Canal Street,
yeah,
which was tens and tens of thousands of people. So people would stop and ask me if I was okay. People were handing me their cell phones so I could use it, but there was no connections. And someone said, "Did you know the South Tower collapsed?" I just said no, which I didn't know. And so everyone that knew I had gotten out of the tower okay, now the South Tower collapses, and they didn't know if I'd gone back.
right.
So now no one knows my condition again.
Wow, so it's like they're worried all over. Now that was one thing that kind of struck me as watching it until a little bit later when I started studying this. I think the way that second tower got hit, when that guy kind of banked that plane at an angle, it looked like he kind of maybe compromised the structural integrity a little bit worse than the first guy, Muhammad Atta, that just went straight into it. And that's why the second building hit was actually the first one to fall.
Yes, yeah, I would agree with that. Yes.
Did you have, and I'm sure you probably, and you may know him, with these speaking engagements and things that you do, but Jay Jonas?
I don't know that name.
Okay, so he was a firefighter he had to be in the first tower hit, your tower, because he said as they were coming down, they heard the first one collapsing. So at that time, he knew if that one can go, this one can go.
Yes. Yes.
Coming down, they're going floor by floor sweeps, and then they run across this woman. I think her name was Josephine Baker, but I'm not a quote on that.
Josephine Harris.
Oh, Harris. Okay, Harris.
Hey, that was ladder company number 6.
Yeah, that was who got Jay Jonas was leading that crew.
There was a battalion chief, so that must have been Jay Jonas. I didn't know his name, and 5 of his firefighters.
Yeah, they got trapped in Stairwell B.
That story is in my book.
Okay.
Because police officer David Lim was the police officer helping the battalion chief, and that tower collapsed around them, all of them. Yeah, that's
one of the craziest stories I'd ever heard.
It is an incredible story. They were hardly scratched, and when the dust cleared, they were on top of the tower.
Wow.
It's
I
an
mean,
incredible story.
and in her story, and I'm sure it's probably, in your book, but she was hurt very badly, and they had to put her in like a chair and carry her down. So the way Jay explained it was, she was saying, "Go ahead, go on, I'll be fine."
Yes.
If they'd have
Yep.
left her, then by the time they come out, they'd have got crushed by the towers. If
Yes.
they hadn't have took the time they did to come down and been right where they were, they
Yep.
wouldn't have made it either. It was just they did the right thing
Exactly.
by helping her, and it all worked out to where basically that whole building collapsed and was destroyed and disintegrated, except for that one little area.
Exactly. Yeah. That fifth floor landing was untouched.
Wow, that's
It
amazing.
was, yeah. She had a 1 or 2 pounds more than she wanted on herself, and she walked down from higher than 71. And by the time she reached the fifth floor, she was finished.
Yeah,
She was absolutely finished. And those firefighters, God bless them, they were helping her down. And she said, "Listen, you guys go ahead. I'll come later if I can."
yeah,
But they stuck with her, and that saved their life.
yeah. That saved everybody's life. Like I said, if they'd have went on ahead, then she'd have died in the collapse, and they'd have probably got buried in the rubble as the building come down. But
Yep.
for
Yep.
them doing the right thing and stopping and helping her out, they all lived, and that was. I mean, there's a lot of amazing stories in 9/11. Yours being one of them
Fascinating.
in itself, but
Yes.
that is definitely one of the ones that just is like, it's unfathomable. I mean, this whole day was unfathomable. That one was just really, really always struck me as just, you
Yes.
talk about right place, right time. It doesn't get no better than
Right.
that.
Exactly. Yeah. If it's not your time to go, we are not going to go. We're not going to die.
So when you're at your friend's house, is now you've obviously seen this devastation. I'm sure now it's calling family members, calling loved ones, calling wives, let them know you're okay.
Well, the phone systems just collapsed all around New York. Although the phone did ring, it was my wife. I don't know how she got through, but she did. And I just I just said, "I'm okay. See you later," and hung up. I was just so exhausted. Oh
Oh,
dear.
I bet, man. You probably can't imagine how tough that is. Like you said, I got a 2-story house. I get winded going up one story or coming down one story of stairs. I mean, granted, I've missed the gym for the last 25, 30 years, but I can't imagine going down 140 something flights. I would be dead. And some of those
Sure.
firefighters, God bless them,
Oh,
all of them
oh,
that lost their lives, but going up through those
'cause we,
stairs, wearing that gear, lugging
yeah, well,
hoses, and I mean,
yeah, we passed him. We passed him in the lower floors as they were going up, and it was just a head shaker. Everyone was praying for them and wishing them the best. And God bless.
what was it,
Yeah,
like 443 that passed away, something like that?
393.
393?
But I used to have that number better embedded in my
I used to
recall.
too. It's been a while since I've looked at it. I know it was a high number, man. I mean, it
Yes.
was, and every one of those guys are heroes for what they did and the lives they were able to save.
Yes.
Like a lot like Rick, like what you were saying. Rick got his people out and he was continuing to do sweeps and
Yep.
trying to evacuate as much as he can. And ultimately, the building wound up, claiming him as a victim. But I mean, just so many unsung heroes. And
Mm,
when you go back now and you see those representations, those fountains
yes.
there, it does something to me, and I wasn't there. It just puts you in a
Yes.
mindset. I can imagine what it does to someone like yourself when you go there.
Mm. Well, it took it. Well, I was down there almost every day for years. Um, First, with part of trying to do some of the rescue. I wasn't that involved with it, but I was going down there. Um, but then after the cleanup, they were just doing all the cleanup. I would go down every single day, and the Port Authority put a security fence around the entire 16-acre site. And I would go down and be inside the fence, and I would talk to the tourists. and ask them if they had any questions. And so I just field their questions. And if they asked if I was there, then I'd confess, and they'd ask me to tell my story. And just tens of thousands of tourists would come down there. And I had nothing to do with my work for like 3 years.
Wow.
Why they kept me, and I'm not an employee, I'm still a consultant because I missed becoming an employee by 14 minutes. But I considered that everyone else also went through the same or similar experience, so they understood what we were all going through. So I'd go down to the World Trade Center and talk with the tourists and speak with them and give them a little something extra to take home with them from having made it down. And that was extremely helpful to me, because I didn't think I was affected by any of this. You know, I'm a man,
Right.
which is silly. But by golly, I couldn't stand on the train platform and have a train go by without backing up, putting my back to the train and hanging onto the rail with those trains going by for years. It took me years to be able to look like I'm a normal person waiting for the train to arrive, or going under a train trestle. That was impossible for me. Certain sounds of thunder were like the airline coming into the tower and the South Tower collapsing. It was pretty undoing.
So I mean,
then, of course,
PTSD at its highest form there, I'm sure.
And well, yes, yeah. And then I had to for 3 or 4 years, I had to pee every probably 15 to 20 times a day. I didn't get a lot of sleep. A lot of things started happening.
No, I can believe it, man. And what led you to begin writing your book? Was it just kind of an outlet? Because I can see where being able to talk to some of the visitors and tourists down there, a lot of people, like you said, I think there's this aura or stigma of, men have to be men and this, that, and the other. But I think you need an outlet. Everybody needs an outlet, be it man, woman,
Yes.
child, or whatever,
Yes.
especially in a traumatic event like that. So I think you being able to talk to those tourists and tell your story was a way for you to probably release some of that was, pent up inside you. Is that kind of where it started from, you writing down to eventually write your book that we're going to get into here?
Well, it didn't start there, but it was very helpful to me. The genesis of that book was September 12th. Because when I got home on September 11th, it was late afternoon, early evening. And my wife's story is in the book also. And it's actually, I think, more interesting than my story, because it's from the perspective of all of our loved ones and friends and family watching the event from the outside looking in. Mm-hmm. My stories and the other individuals in the book are from the inside out. Right. Ergo the title. So I picked her up. I drove to Doug Karpoloff's wife's home, which is, I just knew she would be there, and she was. And when I parked, there were 3 steps leading out of the front door down to the lawn, and I'm walking up the sidewalk, and she's 5'4", weighed 100 and maybe 15 pounds, and she came barreling out of that house and leapt through the air like a leopard, came flying at me, and I thought, oh, I am gonna die. I cannot take one more hit. But I survived, and it was the greatest hug I ever had. It was fabulous. So anyway, after I visited with Doug Karpoloff's wife and his 2 children and told them what I knew, we went home, turned all the lights on, and we talked till like 2 o'clock in the morning. Turned all the lights off, went to bed. 15 minutes later, my wife, Sarah, said, "You want to talk about this?" And I said, yes. We got up, turned all the lights on, did the same thing on Tuesday. Now, Tuesday, during the day, we're starting to try to figure out how to get a hold of people. Telephones aren't working still, but the internet's working and email's working. So we're trying to contact as many people that we know to find out who made it out or what their status was. So now it's nighttime. It's late at night. All the lights are on. I'm still talking about this one day later, 24 hours later. And as I'm talking, a little thought is like implanted in my head. 3 words: write a book. And that was the genesis of the book. 6 months later, I bought a little recorder, went around to the people I wanted to interview and asked them if they wouldn't mind being in a book, interviewed them, and then the work of transcription and putting it together began. But it was still 2013 was when it finally got published, because I finally got to a point where so much time had passed and I'd gotten involved, and my wife was dying from cancer. So I was a bit occupied. And then my project manager, I'd invented a new security program for the Port Authority and all of the agencies in the metropolitan area. And we were walking through the World Trade Center site, and my project manager, who is a woman, stopped me and she said, "By the way, Eric, how's your book coming along?" And I said, "Terry, I've put it on the shelf. I'm not finishing the book." She said, "Why?" I said, "Well, so much time has passed by. Who could possibly be interested in 9/11?" We were standing at the World Trade Center site, and she looked at me astonished, and she put out her right arm and did a 360-degree sweep. She said, "Who are all these people?" There were thousands and thousands of tourists coming down to the World Trade Center site. I said, "By golly, you've got a point."
No.
And so I finished it, and coincidentally, a classmate from 1966, when we graduated and hadn't seen or heard, or we hadn't contacted each other, was a mucky muck at Barnes and Noble. I just learned that. Hunted him down, went and saw him. We had lunch. He wanted to see the manuscript, such as it was, and one thing led to another, and he got a Fifth Avenue publisher to publish my book, and it's been selling. I get a check every month. It's been, and as a result, I've been on the speakers tour. I've had a heck of a lot of fun speaking about 9/11. If fun's the right word, but encouraging people and bolstering them, and talking about how we can make better efforts and how we can learn from adversity. So it's been a tremendous experience.
I get exactly what you're saying. It's hard to explain it to people, the fascination you can have for this. It's like you said, it's been fun for you speaking and informing people. Obviously not fun as an event and the tragedy that happened.
True.
I mean, I've myself, like, if there's a documentary that comes out, I watch it. If there's anything on
Yes.
Nat Geo that comes out, I watch it. Typically with the anniversaries, History Channel and things like that usually play newer documentaries. I don't think it's something, in my opinion, that'll ever get old. I try to even show my kids now. I got
Yes.
a 13-year-old son, and I make sure to show him, all this stuff that went on, because obviously, he doesn't know about it, but I'm telling him, like, as myself, that's the worst tragedy I'd ever seen, displayed on this country, hands down.
Yes. Yes.
Um, and I remember sitting there, and after the towers had fell, and I remember seeing everybody covered in that ash. And I've said this before on other podcasts and in conversations. The world now, I would say, is probably more divided than ever, with politics and Democrats, Republicans. Racial tensions are at an all-time high. But in those hours, after those towers had fell, everybody was covered in that ash. That was probably the one time that I can look back and think none of that mattered. It didn't matter if you were white,
Yep.
black, gay,
Yep.
straight,
Yep.
lesbian, Republican, Democrat, whatever.
Yes.
Everybody was one. Everybody was one nation under God.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I do not want it to for it to have to come to another event like 9/11 for that to happen again. I really think we
Mm,
need to figure out a way to get there without
mm.
this taking place. But definitely, I think it showed the world, you know, it came together like I'd never seen. New York, especially. New York on its own came together, but the nation as well.
For 6 months, Wade, the country was united.
Yeah,
My
exactly.
God, every street corner was cheering the firemen, the policemen, the police, and the firemen probably didn't pay for a meal for a year and for years afterwards. People were making collections, and that rescue effort was just fabulous. We had to turn away people. There were a couple of young fellows from Spokane, Washington, or out in the country. They saw that happen. They immediately threw two pitchforks and shovels in the back of their pickup, and they drove cross country, got to New York, said, "We're here to help." And we had so much help, and they let them in because they'd made such an effort to drive cross country, and they let them in. But by golly, what people did to assist was just fabulous. Everyone pulled together.
It was. Now,
Yeah,
one thing I wanted to get into your book, obviously, we're going to put a link to that in our show notes on this YouTube episode. So if people want to pick that up, all they got to do is just go down in the links. They can click it. It'll take it right to your book. And so,
wonderful.
hopefully people will go and pick that up and read more about this. But your title, or not your title, but excuse me, your picture for the book, you kind of got
Ah,
a little interesting story as how that came about. So real quick, kind of tell us about how that came about and why you chose that picture.
when it came time for me to select a photograph for the cover, I was looking. I wanted to show the towers in flames, and a couple of the photographs I had to call the New York Times, and they wanted thousands of dollars for the rights to, and I wasn't going to pay anyone thousands of dollars, much less $100 for a photograph because there are about a trillion photographs from that morning.
Yeah.
And I'd gone to bed with one night, and I woke up in the middle of the night, and another thought. I woke up with the thought. There's a lot more to this, Wade, than meets the eye. I woke up with the thought. Find Jim Usher. Well, Jim Usher was one of the vendors that was putting in the upgrade from the '93 bombing, and he and I knew each other. And his office was in the basement of the South Tower. When that aircraft flew into the North Tower, he didn't hear it, but he felt something that was out of the norm, a change in air pressure. Excuse me, something, but he knew something was wrong. He immediately evacuated his office, evacuated the lower level of where he was, and he made his way up to the lobby of the South Tower, and someone yelled, "There's a man laying out on the plaza." He went through the door, didn't look up, didn't look around, went to the man, and there were two men that needed assistance. So he picked up one, walked him out of the plaza to an aid station, and as he was coming back for the second man, he got almost to the base of the tower when the second plane drove into the south side of the South Tower. The explosion and the overpressure from that concussion slammed him to the pavement, and he knew he was going to die. He reached into his jacket pocket, blindly held his camera up because he was face down, smushed on the. He blindly held that little digital camera up and went click. Because, as he told me, he wanted his two daughters to know how their father died after they took that camera out of his dead hand. Well, he survived. It was a miracle that he didn't get any of those javelins into him, but he had thousands of minute pieces of glass he spent hours and hours on a examination table in a hospital, having all of these pieces of glass picked out of his body. And a year or two later, we found each other. And he showed me that photograph. He said, I've never shown this photograph to anybody. And keep your mouth shut. I don't want anyone to know I have it. So 10 years goes by. I'm looking for a cover for my book. Hunt down Jim Usher. I have no idea where this man is, but I find him. I give him the elevator brief on what I was interested in, and he didn't even hesitate. He gave me permission to use his photograph on the cover of my book. And you can see our national colors are still flying. They've got maybe 3 seconds left before they're destroyed with all the debris that's coming down. And that's where he was slammed to the pavement, right where the flagpoles were.
Wow. Yeah, it's amazing he didn't get just demolished in that.
He thinks so too. So I took his photograph, I copyrighted it and sent him the copyright so that if anyone wants to use it, he can do what he wants with it. So that's a dramatic photograph.
Holy cow.
Yeah. Fascinating story.
Absolutely, man. Listen, I can't explain to you how grateful I am that you come on this podcast. Since I started this, I've talked with everybody. I've talked with actors, comedians, old mob guys. I mean, everybody up under the sun from all walks of life. But I said, I want to speak with someone that was in those towers on that day that, made it out and has a story to tell. And you have not disappointed a lick. I think your attitude and your outlook on this tragedy should be an inspiration to people. I mean, I know it probably wasn't easy for you, but you are, my hat's off to you, man, the way you're handling this and what you're doing to, bring light to it, keep it in the public eye, keep telling people about it. Like you said, keep awareness up. You're doing a fantastic job.
Well, you're very kind words. Thank you, Wade. And I've been asked how I've been able to do this. And my answer is that almost from the very beginning, I absolutely refused to let the event control me. I was going to be in control of me. Now, it's taken a long time to pull myself together.
Right.
There were 3 years where in those 3 years, you and I could not have had this conversation. I would hear the first half of your sentence, and by the time you finished the second half of your sentence, I didn't know what the first half was. I had no idea what people were talking about. And I'm going to business meetings and listening, and I take a clipboard with me, an old Army trick, bring a clipboard, and I'm pretending to write notes on what speakers are saying in meetings. And I look out and I nod, and I had not a clue what anything was being said at any of these. So it took some time to work my way through all of this.
Look at the notes, would just be a bunch of scribble scrabbled on there.
That's exactly what they were. It was just, it's that old con man in me.
Yeah. When did you keep your job there? Like when they built the new tower, did you go back to work in the new tower?
I did not go back to work in the new tower. By then, my job had changed. The Port Authority stood up an Office of Emergency Management, and I was with the Office of Inspector General for about the first year, and then they moved me over to the Office of Emergency Management, and we did security work all over the whole Port Authority, all facilities, airports, tunnels, bridges. I've been everywhere. It was just a great job, and in 2008 they were going to make me a permanent employee again, and the next day the crash happened. And so all hires were stopped, and I never did. I never made it as an employee. But they kept me on as a consultant for 20 years, which is illegal, but they did it, and I didn't mind.
Wow.
They paid me, and I had a great time.
Let me ask you a question before we close out. I want to close out with this question.
Yes.
Say if you would have had a job where you had to go back into the new tower, Would you have been able to do that, or would it have been just a little too rough? Because I got to tell you, if that was me and I was in your situation, obviously, if you're on the ground floor, obviously you felt something, but you probably got out pretty quick. If you were up there, had to make that trek like you did, seen those fireballs, seen those people falling, seen the devastation at the bottom, seen the collapse. I mean, everything that you went through that we've covered here in this interview extensively. Would you have been able to go back in that tower and go to work without it not eating away at you a little bit?
The answer is one word. Yes. Now, let me fill that in a little bit. For all those years they were building that new tower, Tower 1, because of what I was doing with the Office of Emergency Management, New York City would call me, and people knew that I was able to get access into the World Trade Center site. I took SEAL teams, I took Delta teams, I took FBI folks. I took a lot of people up into those towers, that tower as it was being built, up the construction elevator, which hangs on the outside of the tower, which doesn't make me very happy going up those things. But I'm a man, so I pretended like it was okay. So I figured, listen, just carry on with life. Don't let this incident, don't let Osama bin Laden dictate to me how I'm going to live.
Mm-hmm.
I refuse to let that happen. And I've been up and down high-rise elevator towers ever since. You just do it. You have to do it. You have to carry on. I know lots of employees that refused to go into those towers. So some of them quit. Some of them were accommodated and moved them into other facilities where they didn't have to take elevators.
Right.
But yes, I would go on.
Wow. My hat's off to you, man. Like I said, I'm coming back down there soon. The last time I was there, I didn't get a chance to go up to the observation deck and look out. I think I'm going to do it this next time. That Oculus building down there is awesome. That is one of the most coolest buildings I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, they only spent about $2 billion on it.
I was going to say that thing had to be, because, I mean, from the street level, it doesn't look like what it is when you go into it. It just looks like some sort of structure, like an old dinosaur, huge dinosaur, or something out of
exactly what it looks like. Yeah.
When you go in, then it just sinks in, and it's just all these stores, and it just kept going level after level. I was like, wow, I can't believe this is here.
Yeah.
But,
well, wait, I've got 1,000 stories, and they're all, each one is as interesting as the previous. It was just fascinating to me, if I can use that adjective.
Yeah, no, I get it 100%, man. I understand where you're coming from, and we're gonna let you get out of here, man. I appreciate you taking the time to come on. And are you still living in New York? You living in New York still?
I live 25 miles north of the Empire State Building.
Wow.
I'm in Westchester County.
Okay.
Oh yeah, I commute. I'm retired now, but I'd commute into the city every day, over to New Jersey every day, and I've been in all of those buildings at the World Trade Center site, and I've done book signings down at the gift store, and I've done a lot.
Well, I tell you what, man, if I can get down there, if I can make my way to you in my free time, I'll buy one of those books and I'll come there and see if I can get you John Hancock one.
You bet. Give me a call. I'm nearby.
All right, my friend. Well, I can't, like I said, I know I've said it, but I'm going to say it one more time. I can't thank you enough for coming on and doing this interview.
Well, thank you so much. Call me again. Wonderful.
Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Hollywood Wade. That was Erik Ronningen. And unfortunately, we are out of time. Please tune in next week for an all-new episode of Crime and Entertainment. Erik, we appreciate it, my friend. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Wade.